All right, match 3, we're on the draw, and I definitely keep this hand because we can play Inquisition into Thoughtseize, into Lingering Souls, and since both our plays cost 1 mana, playing a Shambling Vent on turn 2, like if we go Godless Shrine, Inquisition into Vent Thoughtseize, then we can still cast our Lingering Souls on time. So definitely keep this hand. Looks like they're on a cycling deck, probably Death Shadow. They Stubborn Denial or Inquisition. Not what I was expecting to happen there. And they're definitely on Death Shadow. So this time we play around the second copy by playing our land first. We see that they're actually on Esper Death Shadow, and we took their Death Shadow because we don't have an answer to it. We let them keep push, Snapcaster, Lingering Souls, and like the Fatal Pushes we don't care at all about. Lingering Souls is great against those. That card's just bad against our deck. So we definitely let them keep those. If we take their Lingering Souls, we effectively dealt with a pair of flyers, but we have 8 spirits in our hand, basically. So we can deal with their Lingering Souls pretty effectively just with our own copy of Lingering Souls. So we're not really worried about that. So it's really between Snapcaster Mage and Death Shadow. So what can they Snapcaster? They can Snapcast a Thought Scour or a Stubborn Denial. Well, neither of those cards are especially good right now. They don't even have a third land to be able to do that. So the Death Shadow was the one that kind of really stood out to me as the most problematic card. If we had like a Fatal Push in our hand, then I'd probably take the Snapcaster Mage. But since we don't, I wanted to go ahead and take the Death Shadow. And they don't crack their fetch. They Inquisition us and take our Lingering Souls. So now we flash back ours. Just play Event. No need to Thoughtseize yet. They did draw the land, but I figure if they drew the land, they'd cast the Lingering Souls instead. So that is what happened. So now we Thoughtseize them, and we take their Snapcaster Mage, which leaves them with just a couple of Fatal Pushes. Now we're just on the plan of trade off the Lingering Souls, and then we just flash back our other Lingering Souls, and then we'll just play our Godless Shrine. So we're setting up the Tech Edge to take them off a color of mana, depending on what they draw as their 4th land. So now, at this point, we're like, well, all right, you can Fatal Push our Vent, use the last Fatal Push, so now you down to a few cards, kind of at parity, but we have the Wrath to clean things up whenever you draw a threat. You draw a 4th land, so we're going to go ahead and take you off of it. So it forces you to fetch your other one. You Thoughtseize, take our Wrath. Okay, so we're still pretty close. You're at 8 though. Draw Liliana, that's pretty good. And we're going to play this Godless Shrine untapped, play around Stubborn Denial, because we really want this to resolve so we can plus it. There's not a lot of cards that they could be holding in their hand at this point, and they discard a Stubborn Denial, which is exactly what we did that for. So that was definitely worth it. Because I'm thinking, so the reasoning for this, and some people don't do this, and you should do it more, is this is important. You need to think about when the opponent is holding cards, what could they realistically be? Like, what cards would my opponent be holding in their hand at this point? They wouldn't be holding a Death Shadow, they would cast it. They wouldn't be holding like a Tassiger or a Gurmag Angler, they would cast it. They wouldn't be holding a Snapcaster Mage because they would just like Snapcaster for probably a Thought Scour and Thought Scour themselves just to draw a card and get another creature on the battlefield. And so it's kind of like, well, it's not a land because they've been playing their lands and they've been stuck on lands. Then they played their 4th land and we killed their 4th land. And so it's like we know they don't have lands in hand. We know they don't have any threats in hand. Well, what do they have in their hand? And one realistic card they could have in their hand is Stubborn Denial. Another very realistic card they could have is just like more Fatal Pushes, but they've already gone through 2. So like Stubborn Denial is like one of the few cards in their deck that it just really makes sense for them to be holding as one of the two cards in their hand. There's not a lot of other things that make sense, like why they would just be holding two cards in their hand at this point. And so by playing around one of the most realistic cards for them to have in this situation, um, we basically kept ourselves. We gave ourselves a Liliana. So uh, that was pretty good on our part to do that. So they cycle Street Wraith, they Thought Scour themselves, don't find anything good. Go ahead and attack first, cast the Lingering Souls, and then plus the Liliana, flashback Lingering Souls. So we have 5 spirits, you're down to 1 card in hand, and you're at 4, so you're just basically dead. So they conceded at that point. Um, the way we sideboard against Death Shadow in general, especially the Esper variant, we bring in the 2 Rest in Pieces, we bring in Engineered Explosives, and we bring in Elspeth. All those cards are fantastic in the matchup. Elspeth, not too much, because 6 mana is kind of tough. They can kill us pretty quickly if they have a good draw. But we have a lot of cards. We have like 4 Path, 2 Fatal Push, Explosives. Like we have Wrath of God and Damnation. We have a lot of ways to keep them from just killing us pretty quickly. So the games do tend to drag on, and when they get to that later point, Elspeth can minus to clear their whole board because like all their creatures die to it except Snapcaster Mage, or I guess in this version Lingering Souls. Um, and then also just plussing it as a way to chump block against their big creatures, and it's just a really effective card I think in this matchup. And of course, Engineered Explosives can blow up all their Death Shadows, or in this matchup, all their Spirit tokens. Rest in Peace shuts off their delve, so they're not realistically going to get to cast their delve cards against us. And so that basically Rest in Peace does that, and also uh, shuts off their Snapcaster mages. And I mean, it shuts off our Lingering Souls from flashing back too, but they also have them, so it's kind of a push. And then so I boarded out a Tectonic Edge, 2 Fatal Pushes, and a Lingering Souls. Now, Fatal Push is pretty good. I mean, it's pretty reasonable in this matchup because we can kill a Death Shadow. But just looking at all the other cards we have in our deck, like there's not a lot of bad cards for us to board out. And we definitely want to bring those 4 cards in. So I felt like Fatal Push was just our weakest card because, like, really the only creature that we want to kill that we would use, like, we can kill a Snapcaster or a Spirit token, but we don't want to kill those with Fatal Push. The only creature we want to kill is a Death Shadow, and like all our other removal spells can kill the Death Shadow. Like, we're not going to board out a Wrath because that's even better against Death Shadow. We're not going to board out a Path to Exile because, well, that's good. It can kill any of their creatures. And so, like, what are we boarding out? Like, Liliana's, I mean, maybe we board out some Lilianas because they have Lingering Souls. But, so that's how we sideboarded. We boarded out one of our Souls, 2 Fatal Pushes, and a Tech Edge. Brought in Engineered Explosives, Elspeth, and 2 Rest in Peace. So then, game 2. We do have Rest in Peace, and we have an answer to their first big creature they play with Path to Exile. So even though we're a little flooded, um, like we have like Ghost Quarter, Tech Edge, so we can get some value out of our cards. Pretty bad to an Inquisition, but otherwise pretty okay. So Collective Brutality, take an instant or sorcery, they take Lingering Souls. So this was interesting. They can't take Rest in Peace because this doesn't allow them to. So it's between Path or Lingering Souls. And I thought for sure they were going to take Path. But then I thought for a second and I was like, why would they take Lingering Souls? Because I could just use my next turn to flash it back. And then I was like, oh, I know why. It's because they have like the Delve creatures in hand. Like they need, or they have like a Stubborn Denial or something for the Rest in Peace the following turn. But I was thinking that they're gonna just basically set up a Delve creature and they'd rather me path their delve creature because then they get the extra land off it. So if they take Lingering Souls and I flash it back, I get a pair of 1/1s, but then they get to resolve their delve creature that we eventually have to path and give them a land. So they're basically ramping a land by giving us a spirit or 2 spirits. And so I was thinking, like, that's the only play from their perspective that makes sense here, why they would take the souls. And so, given that that is the only play that makes sense, I assume that that's what they have. And then, if we assume that's what they have, then our better line is to cast Rest in Peace. Then and just give like forfeit the 2 spirit tokens and just go ahead and cast the Rest in Peace. So that was my thinking for this play. I'm not 100% convinced it's correct, but I think it is correct because it shuts off their whole graveyard, takes away all their delve cards, and they actually Inquisition us the following turn. So that was actually what they were doing. I think they had the Inquisition, and they're like, whoa, I definitely want to not have this Rest in Peace in play, and they probably just weren't expecting it, and that's why they led with the Collective Brutality instead. Because, well, why would you play Rest in Peace in a deck that has Lingering Souls? Because we're Craig Wesco, and we don't care. Anyway, I explained that in the deck tech why we did that and why that Nambu is okay. But we brought it in, and that is, I think, why they took the Lingering Souls, because they were trying to bait us into making that play, and we snuffed it out, and we played the Rest in Peace. So now they Thoughtseize us, didn't find anything, and given that they followed up their Collective Brutality with Inquisition into Thoughtseize, leads me to believe they had, like, I mean, they could have just drawn them back to back in the past 2 turns, but it leads me to believe it's very probable they had one in their hand, and that was what they were trying to do to cast the Rest in Peace. So I'm off it. That's the last thing I'm going to say about that play, but I think that was an important play we made this game, and I wanted to explain that in detail. So they Snapcaster just to get some damage in because, well, it's not doing anything with the Rest in Peace in the battlefield. Now we'll just Liliana, and I upped it here because I'm thinking if they have, well, I want to discard cards because, well, my hand isn't like going super swimmingly. We just have kind of excess lands in hand, and they're down to their last few cards. I expect they probably have at least 1 Delve creature, which they did. They discarded Tasigur. But then I'm thinking if their other card is a Snapcaster Mage, well, I'm basically trading Liliana for a Snapcaster if I minus, because they're just going to play the other one and then attack Lily to death. Or if I wait and I plus it, then I get their other card out of their hand, and they have to Snapcaster, attack Lily to 1, and then if they don't draw a spell that they can cast, then I plus Lily again to 2, discard their last card, and then I have a Shambling Vent that's sitting there waiting. They have to push both their Snapcasters into our Liliana to finish her off because she'd be at 2, and then I'd just be able to eat one of the Snapcasters with the Vent and gain 2 life, which is kind of incidental, but basically killing their Snapcaster. And if we draw a Path to Exile, we could really blow them out by pathing the Snapcaster and eating the other one with the Vent, and then we're just way ahead. But even if we don't draw that, we get to set up that play where then the following turn, we get to cast our Sorin and basically make a 2/2, and it just, like, things look pretty good for us in that spot. So that's why I didn't want to just trade Liliana for Snapcaster at this point. And then also, if they just don't have another Snapcaster in hand, that's, like, actually the most realistic and probable situation, is that they attack Liliana down to 2, and then we can just plus Liliana again to 3, and then we have the Vent or Sorin make a vampire line to deal with the Snapcaster, and they have no cards in hand, and then we can minus the Liliana at our leisure to kill the Snapcaster. So I really wanted to get rid of their last cards in hand at this point, and so that's why I took that line. And they had the Purge, which just kind of, whatever. Guess we made them discard their dead Tasigur instead of instead of minusing to kill the Snapcaster. If we knew they had the Purge, then we minus to kill it, because we'd rather kill the Snapcaster than have them discard this card that they're not going to cast anytime soon, especially since we have Tech Edge. So they'd have to draw 4 more lands before they can cast Tasigur, but did not expect the Purge. We draw another Rest in Peace. We want to start with Sorin to play around the Stubborn Denial. We plus Sorin. So the reason that we plus Sorin, because I'm thinking if we minus to make it 2/2, then Sorin goes to 2. Any removal spell, whether it's a Path or a Fatal Push, which I don't know why they'd keep Fatal Push in their deck in post-board games, but they also have Collective Brutality. They could like Brutality -2/-2 to kill the vampire. So any way to get rid of the vampire means they could attack Sorin to death. And so I plus Sorin so that they can only attack Sorin down to 3, and then I get to untap. And when I untap and make a vampire and Sorin's at 1, and now I have the Vent and the vampire protecting Sorin. So that's why I made that play. It was just basically to protect Sorin. And I played the second copy of Rest in Peace because I was thinking they might have some type of disenchant or bounce effect to deal with the first one. And so like having the card in my hand is like not especially effective. I'd rather just play around a disenchant. And the brutality, kill my creature, which again, like I think that play of plussing Sorin, the turn we played it instead of minusing it, was probably a very important play, because unless they just drew this Collective Brutality, if that was something they already had or had drawn on the following turn, then they could have killed our token and then attacked and killed our Sorin. We wouldn't have had a Sorin. So that was a thing. But then since they are attacking into our Shambling Vent, I guess the writing's kind of on the wall, but we make them have it. Yep, there's the Fatal Push. So yay! This time we're minusing. Yeah, so this one, so I thought about not plussing Liliana, and just waiting for them to play a creature so we can wrath them. But then Liliana's just stuck at 1 for all this time, and we're basically just not emptying the opponent's hand. So I figured the better line is just plus Liliana, lose our Wrath of God, and start emptying their hand. Because even if they play a creature, we could still just minus Liliana and have them sack their 1 creature that they play. So even if they have like a Death Shadow, we can deal with it, just with our Lily. So yeah, I wanted to just go ahead and plus her for that reason. And then of course we're just going to keep plussing, so might as well play the Signet first. Plus, get rid of a Death Shadow, they're conveniently at 13. Minus, play another Death Shadow, play another Death Shadow. So now, oh, we drew Liliana. So their hand was triple Death Shadow, and they were at 13. So we minus Liliana to have them sacrifice a Death Shadow here. Then we play the other Liliana, choosing to keep this fresh one, minus to have them lose their other Death Shadow. Then we have a Liliana on 1, and we also Tech Edge them off one of their sources. So first, if you see what I did there, I Ghost Quartered them first to see what they get, and they got an island, which they probably don't have a plains, but they got an island, which means I kill their white source. If they got a plains, then I would what did I kill? Is it Godless Shrine? But then I would kill the Watery Grave. So we took them off of white mana, which means they're not Lingering Soulsing, which is one of their best draws in this spot, and they're not Celestial Purging. They're not doing any sort of shenanigans. Just taking them off a color of mana, which is big game at this point when you have no cards in hand and we're just in top deck mode, where like all of your white cards, which would otherwise be good, are now dead draws until you draw a way to get white. And given that we have Fountain and Godless Shrine in their graveyard, they might not have another white source in their deck. Like a lot of these Death Shadow decks, they just play like one of each of the shock for their third color, and that's it. So we might have actually put them off of white cards for the rest of the game. So we deal with their Death Shadow, and well, of course not. They drew their white source, but that's why we Ghost Quartered it. And they're out of basics. They just have the one swamp and the one island. So we're keeping them off white, and we draw Lingering Souls. So that's pretty good. So if you're wondering why I didn't flash Lingering Souls back, it's because it's exiled. This is the exiled zone. There's no graveyards because of Rest in Peace. And then we draw Gideon, and that's just kind of the nail in the coffin. And that's it. So Death Shadow is, I think, one of the better matchups for this deck. Just because we have like the 6 1-mana removal spells main, we have the 4 Wraths, and like Liliana's also good against them. Then we have the Hand Disruption to combat their Hand Disruption, and like, you know, it's just, I think that it just in general have better draws than they do, in terms of like the games I think get into top deck modes between all our discard and our Lilianas and stuff like that, and all our sort of removal spells. And I think that we're just a little bit better at fighting that sort of fight. And then we have some nice sideboard cards too. So yeah, this matchup again, kind of like the other matchups that we've been playing. I don't think they're any sort of slam dunk, but there is a lot of play to them, and the matchup is, I think, in our favor because we do have the disruption and the planeswalkers to kind of the planeswalkers are recurring sources of card advantage, whereas their big plays are like Gurmag Angler and Tasigur and Death Shadow, where we just can 1-for-1 them with it. And it's a lot harder for them to 1-for-1 with a planeswalker. So I think that's where we primarily have our advantage. So yeah, that's Death Shadow.